Hello, welcome to the Elevate Your Wellbeing podcast. We are on episode 49. Gonna be honest, I'm kind of sitting here and I'm looking through some of the ideas I've had for topics, and I'm like, oh, what do I want to talk about with you guys today? What do I want to sit down and chat with you about? So, firstly, I would love to know what you would love for me to dive into more. So there are lots of ways that you can get in touch with me that are listed in the show notes. So I would really love to hear from you because I know that you're sat here with me listening, and I really want to open up that conversation. So we're sitting around like kitchen table, enjoying a coffee, some water, or even going for a walk and having that conversation together. So I'd love to dive into topics that you would love me to dive into more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my list. So I've hit record. I'm going to have a little go through the list I've got of ideas. And the first thing, because I always get these ideas when I go for a walk anyway, and I'm like, oh, that would be a great idea. And then it comes around to pressing record. And sometimes I'm there in the moment and other times I'm not. And I think that really is a valuable lesson because we go through that in life, don't we? We have that motivation or we don't have that motivation. But in essence, that is what keeps us disciplined to do things. So even though I'm coming here to you today and I'm not necessarily feeling as prepared as I would like to, or have a really honed in topic, I really want to highlight that, by showing up, you're creating that motivation, you're creating that consistency. And what I want to dive into this week is something that came up for me probably a few weeks ago is learning always continues. And I find this funny because this weekend I saw my oldest nephew who's in his final year of school before he then goes to college. And he literally can't wait. He's totally where I was, that fed up of learning. I just want to do my own thing. I want to go out and experience the world. But the thing is, learning always continues. But when we're finally able to choose for ourselves exactly what that is or how we learn, that's when we really blossom and that's where we flourish. And I find that really interesting because, ironically, since I started teaching yoga, learning has been a huge element of my journey as a yoga teacher and a yoga practitioner and as a business owner and as a person in general. Like, I can remember going to trainings and feeling eager to share what I've learned with my students, feeling eager to sign up to the next thing and continue learning. Because the big thing for me is always knowing the how. Like, how does something work? How do we function the way we function? How does something like a yoga practice make us feel the way we feel? It's all these things. And I really wish there were elements that we were literally taught in school to help us all fall in love with learning. Because there's bound to be people that, you might be someone that's listening to this and you're like, I loved school, I flourished in school, it was amazing. And you obviously flourished in that way that we were taught. Whereas for me, and I can see it with my nephew, Zachary, that way is just one way that we can learn. And if you don't get it, then you're kind of left behind, which is really sad. Whereas we just don't have the tools or the resources to be able to teach in every single way that works for people. Because we're all different, just like our bodies are different. The way I teach yoga is we find what works for ourselves. So there's different variations, there's different options, there's different ways to modify. Yeah. When we're at the traditional school learning, when it's one way or nothing at all, or that's how it can feel if you're someone who just doesn't get it or it just doesn't land. And it can feel frustrating because, a lot of the time you do want to know the why and the how and the what, but we're not necessarily given the opportunity. And it's a shame because there are times when we sometimes think that because we've experienced something one way, that it's just not for us. So we write it off. We learn things in school and we're like, well, that was so hard and I'm not going to use it. So I'm not going to need to focus on that at all. But there could be a slight area or a real niche in that area that you weren't good at, that you can really flourish at. And this came up again, was looking at my nephew's predictions. And I was really surprised on 2 areas. I was like, but I would have thought you would have loved that. And he was like, yeah, but there's elements of it that I'm really not good at and I really don't enjoy. And it was even that light bulb of, we just bunch subjects into one category. And then we're like, well, I'm not good at that. But there could be something that actually you're really good at, that when we go out into the outside world, that is so specifically niched that that's where you flourish. And even in the well-being world or in the yoga world, everybody's different. Every style of yoga is different. Everybody teaches in a slightly different way. So if you have gone to a yoga class and you've really not enjoyed it and you felt it wasn't for you, then this is an invitation to really open up and explore how you could find a way for that to feel good in your body. And that goes for any type of movement or any type of meditation or any type of reflection, or even certain diets. Certain things will work for us for a time, but they won't always last, because we're always changing, we're always growing, and we need different ways of doing things. That's why we get stagnant, because we're like, yeah, this works. We're going to stay on the same trajectory, but we don't, because in essence, we do get lazy because we get comfortable. So we try to make it easy, or we try to do a little bit less. So we take a little bit off of our plate. So I find that really interesting. But something that keeps coming up in my mind is the importance of learning, because especially with things to do with the body, science doesn't ever stop. And a key element of something I was reading quite recently, a key element of science is being aware and honoring that you're always trying, you're always testing, and failure is inevitable most of the time, because you're testing and trying. You're seeing if something that you believe as a theory, if that's real, if it's true, if it actually turns out in the results that you're aiming for. And why don't we apply that to life completely? It's, life is one big science experiment of trying things out, testing them, and seeing if it works and finding what works for us. Whereas sometimes, because we can only go by what we already know, sometimes the brain will tell you, oh, no, you don't want to do that. Whereas when we try it in the body and actually test it out, we take action, we're actually really surprised. And I highlight this a lot when I'm teaching yoga, because sometimes you'll see myself demonstrate a pose and my body's at a different place than, say, someone who's completely new to yoga. They might see me do it and think, oh, there's no way I could do that. And the block comes in mentally. But actually, when they try it, they're really pleasantly surprised at, one, that they could do it, and two, how easy it actually was to do it. So you're then learning, okay, I didn't realize I had this story of, if I see someone think that I believe to be challenging, there's no point in doing it. So it's interesting how this can come up when we reflect on ourselves and who we are and what we do and how we project ourselves into the world and how we take action in the world, that we're always learning about ourselves. And something that always comes up for me is always a nice little reminder. And I think it was something really simple, as when I was teaching a class many, many years ago, and I can remember going to a teacher training, and they were offering these different modifications. And I think that's what I was there to do, was to learn how we can make certain yoga poses more accessible, especially for beginners. And I can remember then teaching a class, and I could see someone really straining in the pose. And I was like, oh, have a go of doing this. And then someone else in the room who had been there for a while literally spoke out and said, oh, but you've never taught that before. And I was like, well, this is something I got taught very recently. So I'm now, sharing that with you. So why don't you have a go and see how that feels? So it's just because it's always been done a particular way, or it's always been taught a particular way, doesn't necessarily mean that is a one size that should fit all, or that just because you've done it a certain way doesn't mean that we can't tweak it or change it. So I think it's really empowering to honor that, yeah, life is a constant science experiment, that we're always learning, we're always continuing to learn and grow, as long as we're opening ourselves up to that. So I would love to know, and this, could be something that you share with me, or it could be something that you're writing in your journal, or just making a note of initially in your mind. Like, how often do you allow thoughts to come in of, but that's how it's always been, or I don't think I'd be very good at that, or all these different things where we put a block and then we never follow through, or we rarely follow through. And I think it can be really powerful to allow ourselves to sit back and reflect on, I was living life from this perspective. Is that still serving me anymore? Or can I let that story go? Can I let that belief go? Can I open myself up to new experiences by trying something, even if it means potentially failing, because it's something I've never done before, or it's something that I'm potentially not good at yet. So I think I'm going to keep this episode pretty short and sweet. So I might just do a little run of podcast shorts just to have a little share of what's on my mind. But I would love to know, how are you feeling with these thoughts? What comes up for you? Do you feel that life is that constant science experiment, that you're always continuing to learn and grow and try different things? And that can be really, really powerful. So I'm going to leave that there. And this is stuff that I just love to give people nudges on, because sometimes we already know the answer, but we need that little nudge as well. So this is what I love to share in my Facebook group, where I go live every week and do weekly live coaching sessions. So they're no more than 15 minutes. And sharing on these different topics I love to go into with my clients when I'm coaching. And it can be based on areas, just like I've shared in this podcast episode, but hopefully it just gives you that little aha, or a different way of thinking about things, or a different way of approaching whatever's coming up for you. So I'm going to share that link in the podcast episode. So you are very welcome to join. It is completely free, and it is open to anyone who would love to learn more about elevating your well-being. See you next week.